Hi everyone, Stefano Facci here. Today we're gonna talk in detail about the track I wrote for the trailer of our new library, Wind Swells. It's been a ton of fun to play. This library sounds absolutely gorgeous. As always, I'll share some composition and orchestration tips along the way. Hopefully it will be helpful for you and you'll be able to apply it to your compositions. So without further ado, let's watch the trailer and then let's talk about it. So that was the trailer. Again, lots of fun to write. There are some similarities with the trailer for Wind Swells in a way that this one can also be divided in three parts. I try to keep it in the same sonic world to the other ones. Maybe because also it's a trailer, they tend to have a build-up in like energy and emotion towards the end. As you can see, there are lots of different instruments here, as is a very orchestral piece. But anyway, as with everything, everything starts with a very small idea, then develops. And to me, this was the idea, like woodwinds. So this was the first part of the theme, really, and you can see in action how helpful it is, the legato feature. So now we have a melody which leads the piece. I'm gonna load a piano so we can maybe talk about a bit more in detail about harmony and melody. So here we can see really well what happens in the first part of the theme. We have these two chords which changes a pedal. I'm gonna talk about it in a moment. And that's the melody that leads the piece. So starting with this part, I'm gonna click on score to have a visual representation of what's happening and also to help me remember what's going on. So we have a pedal here, which is something that it's really easy to use and adds a lot of drama and tension, especially if you have dissonances. So it's a really good compositional weapon to use. Then we use another technique, which is called inversion. This one first helps you to make things a bit different, so it's not always the same bass, and also helps you move a bit forward and develop the piece. So if we play what we had now, is and now, and then an augmented chord. So we add a G sharp that adds an element of a bit of mystery and wonder. And it leads me to a point, which is expand your knowledge of chords, as they will increase the words of your story. So, new emotion, new feelings, instead of like being just seem normal, which could have been fine, but then it's a bit like hints of an adventure or something coming. The more you know, the more colors you have in your compositions. Think about it as a paint. I like to think always about music and colors. And you have, the core colors, I don't know, like blue, yellow, red. And then you start mixing things and you have lots of different shades. And that really makes a nice painting a great one. We can talk a bit about what's happening actually in the orchestration, as that's super important. So we have strings and wind from the Swells library. I mean, there's really no need for any tweaking. I think I just copied and pasted the same MIDI and they work so well. They blend so well together. We have additional strings that have a bit of a rhythm to it. And so on. The main thing here is really the bass that helps defining the harmony. Together with a pizzicato bass, there are also some strings pizzicato altogether. It's really subtle in this part. Before, it was a lot more prominent, but then just felt like, okay, this first part, we want the winds to be really, really clear. So we kept the background to a lot lower than it was before. And it was a really good idea, I think, as otherwise in the second part, there wouldn't have been as much different as before. Then we have some brass here, would have been louder in reality. Like there's no way that would have been like the same volume, I think. But this is a mock-up, this is virtual instrumentation, so I think it's completely fine, really, as long as it sounds good. Then we have a choir that adds a nice color. And really, I think it enhances the overall feeling of a bit of a both mystery and awe. Then we have piano, like has some granular effect, so it actually adds rhythm. The harp is really important actually, as this nice notes. So both with glissando. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to not only care about the main element, but everything else that surrounds it, because it really makes such a difference. If we like mute the winds, moving on to the second part of the piece, this is like a true development, and we can see that visually with how I use the new legato feature from the library, and or like this is like the patch, a huge space, pulsing all to the left, flutter all to the right, and air just by itself, 2 bars. Okay, let's listen to this one. So the point about this feature is that it goes up and down in dynamics. So you want to be careful not to place an important bit of melody at the very end, because that's when the sound is dying. Because this is like a same pattern all over and is supported by many instruments, I thought that was fine. So this is how they all sound together. And you can see here I used Arctic Tundra and also Everlasting. They are design patches, though patches that come with sometimes with multiple articulations combined and have effects on top, like pre-made. Another big point I like to make is transitions. The more fluid, the better. So especially in pieces like this. And there are a few ways you can achieve that. For example, harp runs, cymbals, timpani rolls, brass swells, they really help a ton. I feel in the second part everything's up a notch in terms of energy. We have the intimate legato series doubling the melody. And you can see here that I moved a lot the mod wheel to match the swells, which are also doubled by a few other things like strings. The string staccato from before are a lot more prominent now. Same for the brass. Another tip I'd like to give you is to double your bass line with a sine wave. This is something I learned years ago and I keep doing it, especially in trailers or big pieces that require a lot of support. It really works well. It's a fine balance between, blowing up your speakers and being solo that you don't hear it. If we go back to talk about harmonic choices and compositions, before we were in G minor, then we ended up in E flat major, C major with the augmented fifth, and now we are in D flat major. So we ended like. So this really feels like a new beginning, a new something that started. And not only that, but the melody is now playing in thirds. The melody is quite easy. But there's a twist. So, as I said, we are in either C sharp or D flat major. F minor. See. And then you might think, I'm gonna repeat this. But I do not. I go to E major, which comes a bit as a surprise, but I think in a trailer especially, that's what you want. I think you want to keep people on their toes and not expect what they expect. I think it's, again, another fine line between leading the listener to something that can sound familiar so they're not lost. Okay, this is melody, this is repeats, but also introducing things or harmonic changes that make it go like, oh, okay, that's maybe unexpected, or that's not where I thought it would go, but that sounds good. It's just a semitone down from minor, major. And the great thing is, like, you can replicate it with any chords really at any point in time and space with the scale. So yeah, just remember this: minor and then semitone major. And that's what I did here. And then if we move on, we have basically the same part as the part 2 in part 3, but really here we go all in. We added a lot of things, a lot of energy for a massive climax. Look here, there are the drums that kicks in more prominently at the end. Keep your, the big guns for the climax. Like if I use these drums here and here, now they wouldn't make any impact. The listener would already listen to them. But here's like, oh, the grand finale. Okay, let's bring everything in. So some things for the end of the climax. Another thing I used here, you can see, is the riser. Which again is not something like that you perceive it a lot the way I mixed it, but it definitely adds to the overall feeling, like, we're reaching the end. I did some volume automation here, so it goes up and up everywhere. Same, for the intimate legato. Let's listen a moment to how the string swells and wind swells sound here. As you can see here, I used gator, which is something that adds a gator to the sound, and it really creates a lot of movement. And so this was the normal legato, and then I also added a huge space with pulsing air and flutter. An octave lower. Now in context. Brass are fantastic for climaxes. Love the horn melody doubling here. I think it sounds really great. And then for the final, when the title appears, we have something I really, really like. Let's listen to that. It's a really nice cluster. Let's see if I can replicate it a second. The main notes are C and E. Then we add A flat that resolves on a G. So it's basically the same concept as before with the augmented. Which has something of mysterious, and I love the flutter. So we have pulsing, flutter, air, and just this combined create this incredible sound. We had a low bass here, and I think that's it basically. There's still the boom from before for the effects, and then some string swells, but it's mostly wind swells. So the airy sound of the winds really works so well throughout. And one thing it's like stood out to me was like how well it blends in an orchestral setting. It's like you don't have to spend ages EQing or anything. It just works like instantly, especially with wind swells, with string swells, as they record in the same space. Like, for example, you think your strings sound a bit thin, bam, you just double with wind swells, and then you have not only one color but also like a bigger sound. The last point I like to make is about giving yourself time to think about what you composed and how it sounds. I know we are often, like, if not always, in a rush, big deadlines incoming, but then going through revisions, maybe sharing it with people you trust helps, I think, immensely. Compose, okay, then keep it there for like a day, don't listen to that, go back to it, and immediately, I'm telling you, immediately you'll pick up things that you never heard before. Like, they stood out like a light in the dark. It's like, oh, okay, this actually doesn't make much sense here. The melody is not as memorable as I thought it was, and so on, like on mixing things, like an instrument stands out or not enough. So give yourself time to listen to your piece with fresh ears. So in the end, I think we covered quite a lot of points, which were like both harmonic, like the pedal, the inversions. I didn't say too much about melodies, as that's not really the focus of the library, because this library was mostly focused on chords. We added this new feature, which is amazing, so adds a bit of melody, but that's not really the focus. If you want melodies, I think the best way is to, to get the Intimate Legato series, which is like the best of the best for me in terms of melodic writing. This said, I can leave you with one like final tip about melodies. It's super, super easy. If you want to create something memorable, you need to be sure you can whistle it. Really, that's it. So many memorable melodies. You can sing them, you can whistle them. That's, the easiest piece of advice I can give you, and probably the most important about melodies, for if you want to write memorable melodies. And then you say, okay, pedal, inversions, how to expand your sonic language with not such obvious chords like augmented ones to create new emotions. Then transitions, that was maybe more referred to orchestration with cymbals, timpani rolls, and tam-tam, harp, glissandi. Then harmonic development, keep the listeners engaged throughout. Don't repeat the same thing over and over. So that's how I did here. I gave in some familiarity with the melody in thirds, which is like the same pattern repeated through 6 chords. But then I had a big modulation from F minor to E major. So that's something that keep your piece fresh and interesting. Then final climax, just mix electronic and orchestral things like the FX, the boom, add the electronics parts, the bass sign. That's a really good tip. Even if you write contemporary classical music, it adds so much to have that bass supporting. Really adds a ton. So, and this is just the sampler from Logic, by the way. It's nothing special. Just use a plain sine wave. And then keep the big guns for the ends, for the drums, for the very latest climax. Don't use everything all at once, otherwise there won't be room for development. And then with Wind Swells, there are so many possibilities, again with the legato, but also just for the plain articulations. There are 5 different articulations you can choose from. So it's like normale, molto vibrato, pulsing, air, and flutter. 5 different bar variations. Look here, that's the end part is 4 bars, it's mostly 2 bars, but then it really can fit your needs. And the fact that you can combine articulation like I did for most of the piece, really, with pulsing, air, and flutter, it creates something it's unheard of, I think. You can create your own ensemble. And then the mapping thing, which I haven't showed, but you can watch the walkthrough where I go in detail here. You can mix and match ranges here, like multi vibrato, and like that you can really create your own unique ensemble if you just want some articulation in the low register or high register, and so on. So there's really a ton of stuff here that can kickstart your pieces, like it did for me, because everything here started with just these really 4 chords. So that's all for me for today. Thank you so much for joining me. And if there's anything that is not clear, or if you have any questions, feel free to just write them in the comments and I'll do my best to reply. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.